What if FLOETTE Eternal was in Gen 1 OU? This is a weird Pokemon to go over, but definitely interesting. You might think it might make more sense to wait till Legends EA, but there's a decent chance that this thing is going to get a Mega Evolution. And if you actually look at the stats here, it's already good enough to do something in Gen 1, well, at the very least, it's worth asking the question and making replays on it. Don't you think? So let's go over it. Now, should I start with the positives or the negatives? I think I'll start with the negative. Or not both of them. And there's mostly two. But one of the ones that's going to suck right away is the fact that it's a pure fairy type. In Gen 1 custom games, I would say fairy is probably the worst type you can be. Which I know is insane, because things like bug, poison, and fighting are a thing. But the thing is, even though those three types are bad in Gen 1 historically, everything has the potential to be better with Gen 1 custom games. Because then we have the freedom to add any Pokemon or moves that we want. So something like Poison can have Sludge Bomb, or Fighting can have good Pokemon with Fighting type moves, or you can have U-Turn with Bug types. But Fairy does not get this luxury, mostly. And that's for one big reason. And that's the fact that Fairy in Gen 1 custom games is physical. And the vast majority of Fairy types are built to be special attackers. So most of these guys are not getting any stab whatsoever. And that really sucks. But at least for FLOETTE here, it can somewhat play around that. And that's where we're going to get to its stats. 92 speed is technically the slowest amongst the fastest Pokemon, since you're slower than Jinx. But you know what? That's still pretty fast. And you have a great crit rate, which you're definitely going to need, because you have Razor Leaf, which is an auto crit, and your signature move, Light of Ruin. It's physical, but ironically, that's a good thing in this case, because you have great special stats. 125 is enough to hit anything hard, and 128 is enough for you to tank Psychics even though you don't resist it. That's already pretty good. And Light of Ruin gives you a very powerful physical move to hit things like Alakazam and Chansey with. And considering that nothing in Gen 1 custom games resists Fairy except for Steel, not even Poison and Fire, literally nothing can switch into it, because it's going to do great damage no matter what. That's honestly pretty great news. Granted, the HP is average, and I guess you can say the defense isn't really that great. Although 67 is only 3 less than 70, and 70 is Taurus's special. And obviously Tauros, like, you don't like to put it against Starmie or Alakazam anyways, but it doesn't exactly, you know, it's not exactly weak on the special side, like, let's say Rhydon is. So even the defense, I'd say it's just average. The move pool can maybe be better. Psychic and Razor Leaf, Light of Ruin. Obviously, I don't need to explain too much about why these are here. But rest is unfortunate. You might think it's there to try to mitigate the recall of Light of Ruin. But no, there's just not too many other moves you can give it. I could have sworn FLOETTE Eternal has Thunder Wave, but it does not. And if you try looking, there's really nothing here that you can put into Gen 1. So that's unfortunate. But not the worst thing in the world, since with your special stat, you might be able to get it off. Although it's only really something you should use as a last resort. Or if you're like going against a Chansey that only has Bolt Beam coverage or something, I don't know. The other main problem is that Light of Ruin does half recoil, which is not only a lot, but when you're using a 140 base power move, and you have a great crit rate, it becomes, do I say worse? Because, like, it's it's like when you're always suffering from success, you know? So, like, I guess maybe it's better just to call it an even trade-off, since if you didn't have that recoil, you would basically just be able to threaten everything. Now, funny enough, I was originally going to talk a little bit down to this Pokemon when I first made some of the replays, but then someone told me that it's basically like using the explosion if you crit and then it dies itself. And once I thought about it that way, actually no, this thing's just pretty darn good. It basically has an explosion half the time, but you don't even need to worry about it killing itself every single time. So it's mostly an explosion, but one that you could potentially use again. And that's great, actually. Like, when you put it that way, I am very confident that this thing would stay in OU. But the other thing is that it wouldn't be like something you can use carelessly. It would take a skilled player to make use of it, but that's something you could absolutely do. I'd say it's a pretty well-designed Pokemon. What do you think? But now it's time to go into the replays, starting with the boy himself, Tauros. And for this replay, I went for just all three of the attacking moves to see what is best. Also, as you can see there, surviving a Body Slam into a Hyper Beam. I think that in of itself should be proof on how, yeah, 60-something defense, not great. But it's also not, like, bad either. For Gen 1 standards, it's pretty average. Although I think a big part of that is the fact that you're using DVs. So it's using max HP and max defense, which definitely helps a lot. And even though on this replay both got KO'd, I would say in general it's probably a pretty bad matchup, since Tauros can get crits or get paralysis. And if it's bad against Tauros, I'd say it's just pretty unwinnable against Snorlax. It's just way too tanky. Amnesia can just make you not care about Psychic anymore. Razor Leaf isn't killing fast enough. And since Snorlax has high HP, you are not going to rate OHKO it even if you get a crit. Not like you would want to. Because against Snorlax here, you might just... The bigger threat might just be killing yourself with recoil. Because your best move is probably Light of Ruin. Although, I think even if that is the case, you're better off going for Psychic. But yeah, you just don't have many options against Snorlax. And against Chansey, what happens if you get a crit on Chansey with Light of Ruin? Only one way to find out. Yeah, it's basically just Explosion. But in this case, it's better. Because, again, you have the chance to, use it multiple times. But way more importantly, Gengar is not immune to your Explosion. And, like I said, Poison does not resist Fairy in custom games. So not only does Gengar not resist it, he would take good damage from it as well. So yeah, I thought this was bad, but I think this is mostly good. Now, one that isn't good, but could go either way, is Alakazam. You can also kill Zam with a crit, but unlike Chansey, you are not going to die from that, which is definitely a positive. But outside of that, Zam being faster than you kind of ruins everything. Because, like, it can go for Reflect, although I don't think Reflect is very good, since Zam is mostly scared of a crit anyways. Razor Leaf is doing, like, decent shit, but not really too great. And Zam has Stab Psychic while you are hitting a resisted Psychic. Even a crit, as you see there, is not doing that much. Zam can more reliably go for Special Drops because it can Paralyze or hit Psychic first, and it can recover off any damage, while FLOETTE, it has Rest, but it's not super reliable. But definitely a quick go either way, since FLOETTE at any time can just completely kill. It's also worth saying that FLOETTE is a absolutely terrifying Pokemon to go against when you are using, like, a whole bunch of Pokemon with paralysis. Alakazam, if it's paralyzed, it suddenly becomes terrified of FLOETTE. And so would other things like Starmie and Slowbro, and maybe even Tauros. They're just worth considering. Now, what's not worth considering is Cloyster. At least when it comes to this matchup. Razor Leaf does a lot of damage, and Clamp is not really doing that much. So, if FLOETTE can just consistently kill there, you're better off going for Explosion, and even then, the FLOETTE player isn't dumb. They can just most likely predict your Explosion. But here's where a lot of FLOETTE's, its issues really start to shine. Because Executor just kind of completely walls it in every single way. Light of Ruin is going to do decent damage, but Executor isn't exactly weak defensively. It can definitely tank the attacks, and then resist both Psychic and Razor Leaf. It's also kind of funny, because Executor has the exact same special attacking types. Obviously hits a much harder Psychic, but it only has Mega Drain for Grass Stab. But I don't know, the fact that these two are in competition with each other in some ways is, I don't know, something about it's kind of neat. But one-on-one, FLOETTE definitely can't win. And even a crit with Light of Ruin wouldn't really save you. I think if anything, it just helps you kill Executor even faster. Though, to be fair, Executor does not have reliable recovery. So any damage you're doing to the Executor is likely permanent. Now, for Gengar here, even if it gets 2 crits in a row, it's not actually going to be enough to beat the FLOETTE, because a critical Psychic is only 40. So even though Gengar's faster, it might get special drops. No matter what, I'm still putting my money on FLOETTE. I think its special status is too high for Gengar to deal with. Same cannot be said for Jinx. Jinx, unlike Gengar, has good stab. Granted, a crit there, as you can see, did a lot of damage. But it's not always gonna crit, And unfortunately, every time Light of Ruin doesn't kill, it's suddenly a huge hindrance. And for Jinx's case here, you kind of have to go for Light of Ruin. Since, as you saw, Razor Leaf isn't even a, 4-hit KO. Or not even a 2-hit KO, sorry. I think it's enough for... Or actually, no, I think I was right the first time. Either way, here's one where actually is pretty decent, and that's Starmie. Sure, Starmie can paralyze you, but your high special means that you're not really hurting Starmie that much, and Razor Leaf is doing a lot of damage to Starmie, to where it can't really recover off, because sooner or later, Razor Leaf will kill. So actually, FLOETTE's main competition is probably Chansey, and FLOETTE is probably the second most consistent Starmie switching in the game. And Starmie just can't really hurt FLOETTE at all. It could try going for Blizzard or something, but it's not going to hurt that much. So you need Starmie sets with Psychic exactly, or maybe Surf. But Surf, I don't think it's going to do much if it's not critting. So, this is probably one of the main selling points of using FLOETTE. The fact that, it does so well against one of the best Pokemon in the game. And last and not least, for this video, we're ending this with Zapdos. Because obviously, you gotta put it against Zapdos. Paralysis is annoying, but not the worst thing in the world. Your crit rate's pretty good. Threatening special drops is pretty good. But even if you lower Zapdos' special, he's able to prey on you with their Drill Pecks, and obviously, crits are, they're gonna happen. But it's still just a pretty solid, could go either way. I gotta change one of these real quick because Snorlax should definitely be unwinnable. But I do think the rest of this is pretty spot on. What do you think? Do you think FLOETTE Eternal would be good in Gen 1 OU? I think despite it being a pure Fairy type, it can still hold its own in terms of having to compete with the other Psychic types, which would be its main competition. But I think it'd be fine. I'm not exactly sure where it'd be in the ranking, but no doubt in my mind that it would be usable. Now, that's it for this video, but I got a lot more coming today exactly, so be on the lookout for that. But until next time, this is Groundback, and I look forward to hearing from you.